files a standard main.
Between Mondra and Valerie.
Jungles expunges. Carly and her naked cyberbullies.
Inquisition and make machetes.
To make you a better buyer.
Then finden off a new thunderstorm.
When she first
It's a gold
Materials is metempsychosis.
and physical problems.
Welcome back to the stream. Lucky 13th in this series.
Nothing to me.
The Mercury we recommend to make them.
And TFTP.
Loves a man.
Amused herself by... You mean not by
Peter's young spiritual.
Or money.
Sinnloserweise gestern.
Seized upon.
some knowledge on the sailing me.
Reunion for the long weekend. Starting delights reduce growth. Needed bearing general. Relocatable cousin.
Goes without saying.
Freeze. I love
Oh, found a crash. That's not where I was headed, but all right. How reproducible is that?
seized upon.
Where are the rest of my channels? I wonder if I should be updating Bespoke. Okay, well, I'm already slightly off track. I was planning on just kind of having that patch going and noodling a bit, and then doing a little bit of coding. But yeah, maybe we'll jump back into coding a little. So I did a bunch of things between streams. I ended up letting the anxiety kind of delay the stream a little more than usual. I guess the main things I've been doing are working on this tool for creating the data files this uses, and I also made that That new waveform display. Oh, Tuco is back very suddenly. Hey, Tuco. Tuco, why so sudden? Are we having some cat time, or are we doing some programming? Love when before streaming I get this feeling that I really shouldn't stream, and then during streaming I get the same feeling. We can still do this, right? Tuco's here. Tuco will settle down at some point. I was gonna say we were just running out of screen real estate having 3 copies of the synthesizer open at the same time. And it'd be nice if I could collapse the piano and make the knobs smaller and or collapse them. And I started to resize one small, and then I think I hit a 0 height assert somewhere. Which is unfortunate. It's probably pretty easy to fix, but now 2 goes in the way. Besides just doing database gardening and noodling around with the synthesizer, it seemed like one software change that I might still want to make to it is to add a way for it to store the sources for each sample. So right now it's kind of like throwing a bunch of audio clips into a blender, and it's, you know, there's like an interesting thrill associated with decontextualizing a bunch of media, but it's also interesting to try to preserve the context. And so I can imagine having maybe an optional feature where there's an extra data file in the zip archive that includes like the original file names and locations and things like that, all the grains. I'm imagining it's a separate data file both because sometimes you might not want to include it, and also because it would be nice if I could load that asynchronously because the synthesizer doesn't need it at all. So if it takes several seconds to load, then that could just happen in the background and then the UI could start displaying sample names once it's loaded. It's been pretty warm here lately. Less so today, though. Maybe we can try to share space with Chico. Got a lot of files in there. That just immediately crashed, but sometimes Bespoke does that anyway. Okay. Okay, that's coming out my headphones. Yeah, that's coming directly out my headphones rather than stream. Is it gonna... Yeah, and it crashes when I try to change the jack routing. That's strange. If I do that in the other order, maybe. Yeah, Bespoke crashes as soon as I change the jack routing. Tuco, what are you trying to do? Well, it would have been nice to mess with that patch a little bit more, but could also be that Bespoke is crashing and maybe I focus on running it standalone for a minute. I could run Bespoke without jack, right? That's a thing that I could do. I think I've got a zombie version of Bespoke still running. Oh gosh. Yeah, I've got one of these again. I'm gonna have to reboot my jack setup on this machine. I don't think this will kill the stream. Did that kill the stream? I think that made the audio server only very briefly unhappy. Restarting Jack during the stream, brought to you by networking. Now Bespoke's connected to all the channels again. Nothing? Oh.
Singing. Majestic. Maddie.
She hoped just horrible food.
Ribbon's neutralist.
Okay, so this one's just making bird sounds.
Sports writers write. More than 25.
Alright, so if I turn off audio processing, the UI kind of goes blank, but it's still responsive. And then this one's just loaded with a bunch of different things, like 12 giga samples of randomness. And it's set up with the mod wheel kind of slowly sweeping through, so as it plays the same notes as these kind of long chords in the background. Well, I guess it's just a single note, but the samples are mostly chords that it's pulling from, I think. This is like heavily layered samples that are all very similar to each other.
Purchase inter- We explained sleaze
And this one's actually falling behind a bunch. So I'm asking it to load a lot of samples, and my CPU is otherwise occupied right now.
What's the mood of flower?
Make you a better
collegiate. Myriad syllabus is tribute
Just
of
the
egg
litany
has
of applications. A little bit. North Atlantic base. Wet and cold.
And many.
milk without sugar. Gerbil swaddle spirit.
I didn't countersign.
Beautiful fuzzy or
You could
overconfident.
go escape. Then look no further.
Any
Look
situation. One, whatever.
brush.
Tablet.
Geknallt
Reporter Nicholas
Emerged from tongue-tied. All LibriVox.
She had and so I know.
Surprising syllabus dupes.
My dear friend. 2000.
So I was thinking it'd be nice to see just on this graph. So each horizontal lane on this graph is effectively one different input, like one piece of a file or file. So I could label them. It's just a piece of text on each row to go.
But make it gesticulate.
Make my bed.
She had
Traveling sadness.
promotes violence.
Nach allen Seiten.
But make it gesticulate.
Do I want to investigate the way that I crashed this by resizing the window?
She had and balance. A long aim at the pool.
Things of countersign. Maybe it's
Plenty of applications.
Is that one just really quiet?
It's my old of emergency home service.
Is that, I mean, is that?
There's some bass samples in here, I think, that are really throwing off the RMS amplitude calculation, so some of them are much quieter than it seems like they otherwise would be. It's interesting. I might want a bandpass filter before I do the RMS adjustment. This one also, if you're trying to play it like in tune. Oh yeah, the speed is not set to 1 right here. So most of these were played, they're like in tune samples because this is from FreePats. So it doesn't have a lot of stuff that are in between notes. And if you try to play it at a speed other than 1, nothing's going to be in tune.
Dazzles familiarizing.
Okay, let's mess with this in a freestanding instance because this is messing with the speed input, which I don't want right now. I'm gonna see if I can reproduce that crash in the standalone version of the app. Pulse audio, is that even running? I didn't just kill the stream, did I? The Chewbacca section is huge.
With new smack.
Words. He felt that he is not self etc. Indeed, loser. Never speak like shall.
That's the
Will
never
asking his
signs of
Refuge and I feel like this is what tuning and internet radio should sound like. Maybe that wasn't me crashing, maybe that was Bespoke crashing. Let's try a debug build. I'm a little skeptical about this feature where I want to include information about the source of the audio files, just because it seems like it's going to be inevitably a giant illegible mess when I'm actually playing any sizable number of grains. But I think that's probably fine, and that it'll be useful when there are a relatively few numbers of channels playing to see where they're coming from. But then, you know, if that's the kind of feature it is, where it's like most useful when it's also least technically demanding, you want to make sure that the less useful and more technically demanding state is not overwhelming. Okay, I looked into these asserts actually. I think this is because I'm running like a pre-release version of Juice that has a new feature that I'm not using. It's complaining. I don't think that's actually something I need to fix.
It's from the field. Preserve his
For a long time. For a long time.
New asserts. Yeah, maybe that wasn't my bug at all. Maybe that was Bespoke itself. We tried Bespoke with a debug version of reverberator. Hmm.
Don't let it become monotonous. You don't.
It's just a small little roll of paint. You're just kind of
Debug build has a markedly lower frame rate, huh?
Trees aren't all straight. See a vision in your mind
And we will go into a darker. Want to make sure that the that's what this foliage up toward the top.
I don't see any new asserts or anything. Alright, I'm gonna assume it's not my bug until I have evidence otherwise. Okay, so my intuition about how to do this feature is that I have an additional JSON in the zip file. Look at these packed archives right now. So here's one that I made recently. It's like 18 gigs. And of course, almost all of that is the giant FLAC file inside, which is stored uncompressed. And then there's a little index JSON, and then some slightly less little binary arrays that have binary index data. And the goal of this is just to be something that is relatively extensible, but also that loads really quickly. I want to be able to, switch between different input files without having to load a huge amount of data into memory before I can actually play any of the audio. So if you have this few megabyte grain table loaded and decompressed, you can get sample offsets for all the grains, which let you seek to the right points in this big flag file. So, and this is like one of the biggest files I've got. The JSON is under 32K, and we've got some few megabytes of binary data, but that's the most I'm really loading when the file is first selected. I'm expecting that this kind of optional piece with the source information is probably going to be in the range of more like tens to hundreds of megabytes, and we're going to be loading it just into RAM. So I think that's going to take a little longer, and we'll want to run it in a background job. I was a little torn about this. Like, it seems like a shame to just store all that in RAM for very relatively little purpose. Like, is there a way I can just look the stuff up out of the file as I need it? I think that gets complicated enough that I don't know that I want to bother with that. It would almost be useful to store, you know, some kind of embedded database. Like, I could use SQLite again. I'm already using SQLite for the Python tools for this, but you know, it's not in the actual juice plugin. Wouldn't be an extremely onerous dependency, but it would be yet another thing to have. So yeah, I'm thinking first pass at this is just load a giant blob of JSON into memory asynchronously. Oh, I should mention on the stream, I threw this up on Twitter, but I did actually publish this project online, so if for some reason you do want to follow along, the source code is actually out there. If you're interested in actually experimenting with this, like, to make audio, that might be cool too. I don't know that I'm gonna go as far as like maintaining binary releases, but if you want to compile it yourself, then you're certainly welcome to make stuff. Put it on GitHub. Yeah, this whole thing. Okay, this has a bunch of subcommands that are all implemented as separate classes here. We need to add this feature to the pack command. Alpaca. And so in fact, the data that we want in this JSON is mostly just two big arrays, one with information per file, and then one with information per grain. And the per grain information would be a file ID and an offset within that file. The per file information could be whatever we want. At minimum, it's like a path name, I guess. But it could be anything that might be useful to correlate with the grains we're playing that came from the original data. But most of the like metadata that I have about stuff right now is just like in the path name, but it could also include basic stuff like sample rate and duration. we're basically saving the internal data between creating this compact index and collecting the audio data. So I think these arrays, we're already writing out the frequencies, and we're writing out these adjusted locations that apply to the whole FLAC file. But like I think we want these file indices and the non-adjusted grain locations. I'm calling these files internally, but I think I want to call them something slightly more generic in this output, hence the sources. I mean, it's like, not really even just that it's more generic, it's that it's more like, what are these files specifically? They're source material, but they're different pieces of source material. This file is already, what kind of sequence is that? Oh, it's just a list. It's already a list of dicts in the right format. So that's easy. Gonna change the units and make this, like, a lot of the internal representations in this are a bit weird, and it makes sense to clean those up on the way out. I'm not gonna make this one liner. Maybe something like that. Let's try a small test. Let's I guess just the speak and spell stuff in that directory was pretty small, but now that it's got 24 hours of bird song. Oh, this is way too long for it to wait for it to run the new code. Gosh, Tuke is such a good cat. I'm gonna watch it crash. Oh. In 64. We need a faster reproducibility here. Okay, that's much better. I don't know which of these it would be, assuming is an int 64. The last time I had a bug like this, it turned out to be one of numeric Python's scalar data types. Normally Python doesn't really have integers. I mean, it doesn't have like integers of particular widths. It has like arbitrary width integers. So I think there are places where no, that's in some code I removed. Yeah, I don't know. dissect this. It wasn't in the files. Interesting. Oh, it probably is the source ID, because this might very well be a numeric Python scalar. Does that work if I just explicitly wrap that in an int constructor? I think that was it. Okay, we've got our new JSON file. Even in this tiny example, it's the second largest file. Okay, let's unzip it and then make a bigger one. Those IDs are just database row IDs. It's kind of tempting to remove them, but I guess might as well leave them in. Oh, I guess I should be removing files that don't get used at all. That, and it would be nice to like reference it back so that each file references the grains that it uses or that it's used in. Okay, here we've got 4 grains, 3 of them are from the same file, and then there's a bunch of files in here. Yeah, maybe instead of just using this entire internal dict, maybe I'll be a bit more selective about what we put in there. Okay, that is much more concise. And we can see the references in both directions. Let's try that for a longer input. Oh, maybe I won't be so fussy about these dictionary keys. Maybe I will just include the whole thing. Gosh, a whole bunch of this project lately has been doing other things while this tool takes its time. So we can start writing the loader for this. Be nice to check this in, even though it's not quite done. I think I want this to be like an optional add-on that the grain index can point you to. The grain index itself is basically read-only after it's created, but it has several of these additional objects that can show up asynchronously, like entries in its cache. Kind of makes sense if it's like the cache where it has its own mutexes and public functions, and then it just kind of hangs out as a member of the grain index. And it could start out empty, and then I would asynchronously load its contents, but the object would always have the same lifetime as the index itself. Alright, this doesn't need to be any kind of separate reference counted thing. I don't think we even need listeners for this. Nobody's gonna want to like asynchronously get notified when we finish loading the sources, I think. I think it's just something that we pull for when we're redrawing the waveform. I was thinking about exposing some kind of like source info struct, although now that I'm thinking about it, like my immediate needs in the UI are really just a string. So I think I'm just going to keep this really simple at first. I wanted all that other stuff in the data file format because it's good to think ahead a little bit when creating formats, because the data tends to live a little bit longer than the code. Right now I just care about the path. Me too, go. Okay. Could I just commit to storing the whole JSON tree here? Juice actually has a reasonably efficient way of dealing with JSON data like this. I don't know that it's actually any better to... I mean... I guess it does kind of save a couple of levels of like looking for attributes in dictionaries. Barely matters though. I might change that. Should this even return errors? This is a purely optional part of the format. So seems unlikely that anybody cares about errors reported here. Output. Okay, yeah, this is already a megabyte of JSON for that. Some popular samples here. Alright, can we try... This is going to take a while, but I should start at packing the whole data set I've got in this modified format. Oh. Let's exclude the 6-channel files. I'm currently still assuming that all the channels are important, and I'm choosing an output that has the greatest of all the input channels, and like repeating any missing channels, which works well for padding mono out to stereo. But if I have any surround sound files in the input, then my whole output's going to be 6-channel, which is kind of overkill. I don't know if it actually compresses the channels jointly with FLAC the way it's set up right now. Yeah, this is probably going to take a couple hours. We can just keep going and I'll come back to it later. Tuco. Hey, boy. Hey. Hey. Honey. Squeaky. Mm-hmm. What? Mm-hmm. Tuco. What does he want? Hey. Do you need something, boy? Yes, he wanted a snack. Oh, man. Gosh, I was hoping that actually starting the stream back up would kind of kickstart my social anxiety, but it's still, hang on. Yeah, so we have an index loader job. It might even technically be possible to do it in the same job. It seems cleaner to start a second job just to load sources onto the index, though. Am I doing the thing where I I'm having thoughts of wrapping up the stream, but the bot probably just tweeted about it. Yeah. I think the bot tweeted about the stream like 15 minutes ago, and now I'm like, out of energy. Well, maybe I will actually end the stream and have some alone time with me and my cat and try to recharge slightly. But I'll try not to be a stranger to the streams even when my anxiety is doing its thing. And yeah, I guess the biggest update on this particular project is that I put it on GitHub in case you wanted to poke around with it. It's an audio plugin / standalone app that you can build with Juice, which is an open source C++ framework. And then it's got some Python stuff for building the data files. Anyway, thanks for hanging out. I will go pet my cat a bunch and probably do some quiet coding by myself for a bit. But I'll try to keep the streams coming when I can, and we can get another project into this rotation too. That might be kind of cool, right? Alright, thanks for joining. I'll see you later.